Yeah.
Morning, like,
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Carolina Alvarez Matthews, and I'm the executive director here at Dallas Contemporary. Welcome. Along with my team, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon. For those of you who might not be absolutely familiar with our space, we are a non-collecting art space here in Dallas, and we present rotating exhibitions, performances, and public programs, all at free admission. Today we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a dear friend, Nadya, in conversation with an absolutely brilliant also collaborator, Will Evans. I will let them speak a little bit more about what they do, but I will also be giving a brief introduction. These two individuals truly are a testament. The art can change the world we live in. You know, in mid-June, I received a DM from Santa Fe, from Turner Carroll Gallery, and it said that Nadya was having a solo show in their gallery, and my immediate thought was, interesting location and ballsy. I immediately booked a ticket and went down, and long story short, we now have the video on display that you guys, I hope, took a minute to watch before the conversation. And you know, it's one of those works that really brings to light that art and activism really are one. And in the times that we live in, this is the work that we should be showing, and it is the work that makes an impact, and it's the work that we as an institution are really proud to stand by. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking the time to be here and to listen to the conversation that we're about to have. I will let Nadya and Will take the stage now. So please come over.
What's up, everyone? We're having a debate about which chair we should each sit in. It's the ultimate artistic question. Thanks everyone for being here on a Saturday afternoon. It's an absolute honor and a joy to be here at the Contemporary, a truly unique space in our city, and a space filled with the kind of art and installations and performances that inspire artists of every medium. And so it makes total sense to be here celebrating the work of a true interdisciplinary artist and a true artist on a lot of levels. And so to be here with Nadya Tolokonnikova is like a dream come true, because to be in the presence of an artist of this caliber, someone who is like truly on another level and has been that way my entire adult life, it's just something really inspiring. And so one of the great questions is like, why on earth is Will Evans interviewing the greatest feminist artist in the world today? And so one of the interesting things is that I've studied Russian literature and culture and art in university and in graduate school. And so as a part of that, I've gotten to know the work of Nadya over the last really 15 years or so that she's been a public artistic performer in Russia and internationally. And following her career has been just extraordinary and inspiring, because what originally inspired me to get into Russian culture and art was reading the work of 19th century Russian literature, as one does. But this question that is posed in Russian literature and art of the last several hundred years is, how can art speak truth to power with the belief that art can, does, and should change the world? And so you have no better indicator of that tradition living today than this amazing woman sitting to my right. So Nadya, thank you for being here today, and thank you for being in Dallas. So it's going to be just a free-ranging, true conversation. It's not scripted at all, so forgive me if it seems like I'm just asking the questions that I've wanted to hear, because guess what? That's the role and the privilege I have today. And if you have a question that you want to ask Nadya, hit her up on social media because she's super active, and come back to more events and keep supporting her art, which is just too amazing and too long to announce. And so I guess I would say the first question today, because we're all here, and you can all actually, you know, over your shoulders, you have this beautiful short film called Putin's Ashes. And so I was going to open up with Putin's Ashes, and then we could go back in time, kind of jump back. Davai. So the first question is, you directed Putin's Ashes. You starred in Putin's Ashes. This is a performance that fits into the Pussy Riot tradition, but also your own personal tradition. And I wondered, what is the sort of genesis of this particular project?
It happened in August 2022, and I've been thinking about what can I do about Putin's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and it's very difficult to answer real-life questions with art, and this is what Russian literature has been trying to do. I don't know if you succeeded in it, but we tried, and it matters. Attempt matters. First reaction on the full-scale war was to raise money, because I always, I'm in nominate between these two identities of artist and activist, and as activist I always want to do something direct action, direct help. So we raised $7 million for Ukraine to protect themselves from the Russian invasion. But then in a few days, in a few months, it came to, well, now it's like we have enough space, I guess, to think about this, what's going on, and try to encapsulate it in art and how it should look like, and it should look very different from what we were doing 12 years ago. When we started Pussy Riot, it was me and my friend Kat, and it was a completely different time. It was very hopeful, very bright, I would say. It's a weird word for Putin's Russia, but we were seriously hopeful that we're the force, we're the people, we can change the world, we can change Russia at least. It was the end of 2011, and Pussy Riot coincided with the People's Revolution, and we tried to change Russia for the best. We were called Kriakli, our creative class, people who believe that Russia is a European country. We believe that Russia has to value life of its citizen and has to prioritize peaceful coexistence with its neighbors and respect to its neighbors. Well, that didn't happen. And so after 12 years, using the same form, I guess, or the core of our practice, dresses, masks, radical statements. My goal was to create something that would reflect these times better, and these times much darker, have less hope. Even if Putin gets out of Ukraine, including Crimea tomorrow, you're not going to be able to return lives of those people who already lost their lives. So this time is not as bright as it used to be. So you can see it in the I guess, color scheme, and in music. It's much quieter, toned down. Voices are not screaming I don't know, ecstatic screams anymore, but they're quieter, and it's much more ritualistic. But it's still ritualistic in the same way as punk prayer was. So we were locked up for 2 years in Russian jail for the punk prayer. And the punk prayer, we asked Virgin Mary to become a feminist, to become part of Pussy Riot, and get rid of Putin. So she didn't really at the time. So we decided to get into magic and shamanism. And so this one is very ritualistic. We stab the ground with knives, and we burn Putin's portrait, and then encapsulate it in these files that we were not able to show here, but they exist, just I promise. Some of them were collected by amazing collectors and supporters of my art, including Tanya, who later showed it at Container Gallery in New Mexico. And the idea is that all of us, including those of you who came here today, with our thoughts and hopes, we can turn Putin into Putin's ashes for real, but it just takes time.
If you go back to 2011, it's so interesting. I was actually in Moscow in 2011 as well, and St. Petersburg, and it was a very sort of interesting time because the hope that you're talking about, I remember it. I remember it well. This world of Russian culture, it felt like the world had opened up inside Russia to the rest of the world, and there was sort of a freedom there that it almost sounds ridiculous to say out loud today with everything we know about what is happening in Russia and what has happened to you and your colleagues. One of the things I want to go back to first, because a million questions just came up. You just brought up so many amazing things. Is one of the most amazing things, when you talk about your art, you very, very, very rarely use I. You have been a part of a sort of a collective group and many collective groups throughout your career, but yet you're also a singular vision, and you're the one that's sitting to my right today. And so I wondered, with your artistic practice, what is the sort of division between Nadya and the groups, the collective, and sort of the well, it's not co-op, but like the larger group art that you're performing?
Yeah. It's your question and also a question of my judge. In 2012, when we were prosecuted, she would always slap me and be just like, no, you cannot say we all the time. You have to say for yourself, because you're the one who are being jailed, and you all might have different sentences, so you have to talk for yourself. And I would refuse. And I don't know what it is exactly, but John, my future husband, says it's very royal of me of always talking about myself as we. But I feel like Russia and Russian language is also much more we-oriented, because if you say, мы с Васей пошли туда, you say in English, you say, the exact translation would be, we and Vasa, even if you talk about me and Vasa, you still say we. So it's very communal-oriented language. I always tried to build communities, and I think one of the thoughts that I had is an artist is a cultural worker, and I always was trying, I always wanted to be an artist, but I also was trying to look for things that would make me more humble as an artist, because I've noticed growing up I was growing up in the 90s, I was very annoyed with, I was mesmerized, fascinated and annoyed with postmodernism. I felt like at some extent the death of author, at least in the way that I was reading it when I was a teenager, was also taking, trying to get rid of your responsibilities as a human being. So I was craving for a new modernism. And as far as I can remember myself, I think since I was 10 or 12, I wanted to find this new modernism. Well, you have Mayakovsky tattooed on your arm, and my first crush was Vladimir Mayakovsky, and what you said about this impulse of, I don't know if it's correct to say it's Russian art, I guess Slavic art. It wasn't just Russian, right? It was Belarus, it was Ukraine as well. Slavic avant-garde. We really need to invent new language for it, because it's not really just like, anyway, we can get into this discussion later. But they really believe that they can change the world, and an artist has to have this crazy, how to take on their shoulders this crazy responsibility of imagining utopia, a new world. And Bolsheviks, from my perspective, kind of let them down. They were not able to give enough respect, trust and credit for the artists to actually change the world. They kind of were like, well, we know better. Fuck artists. So they ended up being either eliminated in repressions, or they emigrated, or they just killed themselves, like Mayakovsky. But I was always craving for this to come back. So I think in immersing myself in the collective, I tried to minimize this very postmodernist my feelings matter, that's it. And I was trying to create a collective, a community, because I always knew that in order to actually make a serious change in the world, you need to have the community. But then later on, I guess after our prosecutors and judges took off our masks, we were forced to show our faces. So then Nadya emerged as a character. And I like this, it's very quantum mechanic. It's like the particle is in both spaces at the states at the same time. So I am Pussy Riot, but I'm also Nadya. But the beauty about having a movement is that you don't always have to physically be in every place, but you can have other people doing things. Like as I was here on the plane from Miami to Dallas, I got sent a message about a feminist party, feminist gathering / rally on the beach, on Miami Beach, with Pussy Riot banners led by Michelle Pred, an amazing conceptual artist, feminist. So yeah, as Putin said, he seriously said it once, group sex is good because it allows you to be lazy.
It's a funny thing. I mean, Putin has been president almost your entire adult life. I mean, more than your entire adult life, right? He's been president since 2000, January 1st, 2000. So we're coming up on 24 years of Putin. And you're not much older than 24, and I'm not much older than you. And so all I know is Putin, and all you really know is Putin. And he does have a very wicked sense of humor, but of course he's also a very shitty dude. And so, wait, is this streaming? Never mind, take that off. Just kidding, I'm already on the list. They know me, and they know I'm here. I'm interviewing Nadya, you're on the list. No, I'm on the list, and so it's an honor. Now all y'all are on the list too. And I think that that's something really...
Anyone can be on the list.
Yeah. So if you haven't met your friends from the FSB yet, you're about to later. And this is the amazing thing. When you meet an artist of Nadya's caliber, you become a collaborator. Welcome to the world of art as it actually is, especially in Russia, in which sort of the Bolshevik tradition you mentioned, you brought it up because so many of these avant-garde artists who influenced your life and mine, including Vladimir Mayakovsky, were instrumental in the revolution and in taking the revolution forward in building a society. And there's this very heady time in the early 1920s when you had extraordinary avant-garde art on these streets building what is now known as the Soviet Union, right? But they were constructing something out of nothing. It's a very incredible, inspiring artistic time, but very quickly the vice tightened around these artists because of exactly what we're talking about. If art can change the world, then they could change the Bolshevik society too. And they could speak truth to power in a way that would take away power from those who had power. And so, very quickly, that came to an end. And in a really tragic way.
It's really unfortunate. I just want to see a different lifetime, and somebody would make a movie, please, about what would Bolshevik Russia would look like if they actually gave enough trust to artists. If Kollontai could finish her work, if Mayakovsky could finish his work, if Malevich, yeah.
I have so much conceptualist and avant-garde Russian art on my arm beyond Mayakovsky. I can't wait to talk about it with you later too, but we will spare all y'all of that. But to talk about...
we'll just move forward on your arm,
yeah.
so you have Komar Melmir.
I have Komar Melamid. I have Tatlin on here as well. His monument to the Third International, for all of us nerds who've seen this, it was supposed to be the biggest building in the world, and of course, it was never built. But it is inspiring, and there's a replica of it in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow, which I hope...
I see replicas of it everywhere. Like,
yeah, nowadays
every art fair I go.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, so cool. I need to go to more art fairs. They don't invite book guys out much, so here you go. Something interesting about sort of the artistic tradition too, we're talking about Russian avant-garde, and when I got to know your work, it was very interesting because it was coming from, in my understanding, the Russian conceptualist school, which I'm bringing up now, especially because we're here in the Dallas Contemporary. And just a few months ago, there was this extraordinary exhibition in the gallery over to my left by Ilya and Emilia Kabakov. And they're two of the greatest conceptualist artists of the same vintage as Komar and Melamid, and just a really inspiring thing. And now today we share an acquaintance with a writer who was also born out of the conceptualist school named Vladimir Sorokin, who is in Russia one of the great, what do we say about Sorokin, right? This video is going to go to him, and so he's truly one of the great artists of all time, but he's now living in exile in Germany, right? He's been the one who has written these books that are often filled with absurd imagery and absolute horror and violence and savagery, and what's...
Lots of sex and shit.
You said it. And then in the early 2000s, when Putin sort of came to power, there was this revanchist conservative swing in Russian culture, and there was a big protest in Moscow at the Bolshoi Theater, and they built a gigantic, these activists on the right built a gigantic toilet and threw all of Sorokin's books into this gigantic toilet. It was like a very hilarious thing that Sorokin took great pleasure in, because it was like something out of one of his own books.
So much.
It's like the funniest thing that's ever happened in modern Russian culture. It's not a book burning, it is a, it's a swirly for books, right? And it's totally ridiculous, but this was their statement, and Sorokin was like, this is scripted. I mean, it's just so perfect. It sold so many books for him. It was extraordinary. And the other thing too is that there's this idea of immortality in Russian culture. And after this horrific Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, one of the best pieces of Ukrainian sort of propaganda that came out of it was like, hey world, whatever you think about Russian culture, which is everybody's entree. Why do I love Russia? It's not because of Putin. I love it because of Mayakovsky, and I love it because of Tchaikovsky, and I love it because of Pushkin, and I love it because of the beautiful museums and cities and all of this. And they said, well, here's a list of all your favorite authors, everyone from Russian history who you love, and here's the history of them. Murdered, exiled, murdered, exiled, murdered, 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 gulag, gulag, murdered. And it's hundreds of people. Everyone who's ever influenced Russian culture artistically in any way. And so if you want to become an immortal in Russian, you do something cool, and then you are murdered, exiled, or sent to the gulag. And so I'm sitting, as you now know, next to one of the great Russian immortal artists of all time, which is really horrific. But this is a society in which, going to prison is the moral inverse of what we understand it in the American tradition, right? You have this great Russian writer named Sergei Dovlatov, exiled, who wrote one of these great books because he was a prison guard in a gulag, in the same gulag where Solzhenitsyn, whom everyone in America knows, was interned in the gulag. And he wrote very eloquently about how being a guard there is hilarious, because it's like you are the one on the morally wrong side, and the prisoners are the ones who are sort of the good, the capital G, good. And
it's true though.
Well,
I
this
had
is
a
a
lot
question.
of prison guards who would be very apologetic for being prison guards, and they'd be like, well, we have our families that we need to feed.
It's labor, right? It's just a job, in that way. But at the same time, like, your experience as a political prisoner, and when you were in prison those 2 years, I mean, you say jail, and jail for us is one thing, but you're truly in this horrific situation that goes beyond jail. But that time there was very formative for you. You maintained a dialogue through letters with Slavoj Žižek, who is a very famous philosopher and cultural critic and thinker, and you came out, I mean, madder than hell, stronger than ever. And so, I mean, that time, how were you not destroyed? How were you not beaten? How did you come out? Because Pussy Riot is born, the Pussy Riot we now know today comes out of that, this international version of it. And so I wondered how those 2 years, it didn't beat you down, and how did you come out the other side with a vision to take it to a whole other level, to actually try to get back to society and the world, to make it a more international art piece?
I think it would probably also would be good if we didn't end up in jail, because the Red Square performance got a lot of press.
A little fine. It was like a little fine, right?
I was thinking like 2 months would be just enough, and I think really started to realize that it's serious after they extended our period of staying in pretrial detention after the first 2 months. Then it's like, oh, it's actually serious. But yeah, I was stoked for the first time when they just arrested me and put me in jail, because you read Russian authors, you're absolutely right. They all went through. Dostoevsky got his fame because he wrote his memoir about his prison experience, and his prison experience was extensive. And he was accused of the same exact thing of going against the government and Russian Orthodox Church. So for the first time when I got arrested and thrown in jail, and I was thinking, oh, it cannot be for long because we didn't do anything bad, I was thrilled. And then they extended it once, and extended it another time, and extended it a third time, and then they gave us 2 years, which at that time seemed like a lot. These days they give us people like me up to 25 years in jail, so that's this completely, when we're going back truly to Stalin's times, because Russia never wanted to talk about experience with Stalin, I guess, and like all of a sudden he is a national hero once again. How is that so? I don't fucking know. That's insane. But at the time, 2 years seemed like a lot to me, and we were sent to labor camps. Again, because Russia had never had this processing of its own history and its own crimes. We seem to just have, at least the government seemed to take pride in having its roots in. It's like if modern Germany would take pride in what Stasi did, it would be the same. So my fresh idea is to turn the FSB building on Lubyanka into a center for people who survived domestic violence, and also really just go through every document and learn about our own mistakes and learn about our own history, how we betrayed our brightest people, how we jailed, tortured, killed our best creative philosophers. We don't talk about it in Russia, and that's why we come back to these mistakes over and over and over again. So same thing with Gulag. It was not reformed. Never had this attempt. I traveled to different countries in Europe, including countries who used to be Soviet countries. So they made a coordinated attempt of reshaping. Arguably, society needs prisons unless we really reshape it, restructure it on a whole different level. They still won't lock some people up, but they tried to make it much more humane than it used to be. And we went through different facilities, and we talked to prison guards, and we asked them about the way how they retrained their personnel about the attitude towards prisoners. So we never did anything like that. And we live in barracks. Prisoners live in barracks. 100, 150 people in a barrack, and you have around 3-5 restrooms, 3-5 just open toilets. Then you have to work. You have to work 16 hours a day with no day off and no vacation. And you're forced to write a letter that you really want to work. So you really want to work 16 hours a day. You really don't want to have any vacations. And you really don't want to get paid for your work. And I was getting paid around 3 cents in a month. Everything else would be stolen by prison guards. What helped me not to get destroyed, don't really know. I was this close to being totally destroyed. I was very apathetic, depressed, devastated. I felt like all of this amazing campaign that I saw in support of Pussy Riot did not bring any results. I felt weirdly betrayed by the whole world, and it was stupid because people supported me, but I felt like they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do enough. I was hoping that somebody could just rescue me. They can stop the police car and, like very I guess like Bader-Meinhof type action just helped to release a prisoner. I was really hoping that somebody could just do that, but nobody did. And there I was working overtime, sewing police and military uniforms, which was a never-ending torture, and you have to sew, produce an incredible amount of them a day. So it's like 200 police uniforms per day, and it's unheard of because in a normal factory outside of, like think of free factory, it would be 100 of those. They use prisoners and they don't teach them how to really sew. They put it in front of the sewing machine and they tell you just have to figure it out. Otherwise, you're gonna let down everyone else. And if you let everyone else, they're going to jump on you. And some of them happen to be people who ate their whole family and put them on burgers and fed to another half of the family that they didn't eat. And you don't want to get in trouble with them, right? And then I found letters in one of my letters that people sent me. It's very important to send letters to prisoners. An essay of Václav Havel, Power of the Powerless. And it told about the importance of one person standing up and saying that the emperor is naked. And it just really taught me that even I have no voice, no power, no nothing. I'm totally destroyed here in this jail. But if I can then stand up and say that the emperor is naked and have this in me for at least 2 years, then I won. That's enough.
The woman who ate her whole family sounds like a very specific example. I don't want to get into that, but that really is going to stick with me for the rest of my life. The reading, you know, the artistic practice. Nadya as an artist, Pussy Riot as really an art collective that is in dialogue with not just the Russian tradition, but has really become something, I mean, truly international. When did the sort of your philosophical and artistic understanding of Pussy Riot as that something more, when did that come in? I mean, you said you read Havel while you were in prison. Were you doing other reading as well? Yeah, doing all this time to think as you're on the machine. Yeah.
But are you asking before jail or?
Yeah, I'm really kind of curious. Like, you know, if we go back in time, you grew up in this part of Siberia that, you know, I know some people culturally feel like Texas is Siberia, but we really have no idea what Norilsk is, right? Like, it is quite far from civilization. It's a mining center in the far north of distant Siberia. That's where you grew up, and you got out.
It's more like Alaska, I think,
yeah,
right?
but it's like Alaska with, you know, isn't there a lake there that's a ridiculous color because it's like filled with all these, yeah, it's a toxic place.
I remember at some point I've heard when I was a kid that Canada is imposing fines on us because through the whole Arctic Sea, we somehow send them fumes.
From Norilsk, it's
from
city
Norilsk,
right.
yeah, it's pretty far. Canada is pretty far from Norilsk.
Were you doing this reading while you were there growing up, when you were a teenager? What do you remember? Was there a moment? Because there is a moment I distinctly remember when I fell in love with Russian culture, and it became my entire life, and it led to everything that I've done today. But is there that sort of moment for you as well?
Mm-hmm. It was called Timurski cactus. Timur cactus, whatever it is. But it's a literary music and art festival. And it was a sister of a Russian oligarch. I'm not necessarily a fan of him, but his sister is really dope. And she, it was like this really short time in Russian history, in Russian recent history, when it was possible for good people to use money for good. And this festival is long gone, and it was really, she was capable of making it happen just for 3 or 4 years. But I was lucky enough to see it. And she brought Dmitry Brigov to my little city. And it's completely unthinkable. And you cannot compare Norilsk and Dal. It's like, no, not at all. I didn't even know I mean, like Thunder Bay in Canada, maybe. But it's a really small city, but you know, still have young, curious minds growing up in those cities, and it really makes me committed to traveling to off the beaten paths and going to places that are not, people don't really visit, because it truly changed my life, that I was able to come to his talk, witness his performance, and saw his video work. And his video work was reflecting exactly on things that totally shaped my life and shaped my performance art. It was him and his cat, and the whole video for 10 minutes he was convincing his cat to say Россия, which means Russia. And he was saying, киска милая, пожалуйста, скажи Россия. My dear cat, please say Russia. And it was called Opera Russia. And another art piece that I saw was him and his son. His son was an adult at the time already. His son was wearing, his son was shirtless, and Dmitry Prigov was wearing Russian police outfit. And they were, how do you call this verb when you do this with the dough? Dough. Kneading the dough. And it's, I guess, was a metaphor of shaping something. And the name of this performance was the narod, the people and the power are shaping the image of a new Russia. And I remember just sitting in front of those screens. It was small screens, just regular TV size. But I stopped doing anything I needed to do that day, and I just sat there for hours and hours and hours. And I was 13. And then I kept coming back to this festival. And then another thing he did, he read Pushkin, Евгений Онегин, «Мой дядя самых честных правил». It's like Pushkin, you have Pushkin on your forearm. Pushkin is good, but the problem with Pushkin, and you probably have an analog of Pushkin, I don't know who would be, Shakespeare, I guess. You just forced to read him one year after another, and then you just hate him. It doesn't matter how good he is, it's just like impossible to read the same fucking man over and over and over again, because they're like a pinnacle of our culture. And then it was the first time when I actually vibed with Pushkin, because he was reading it in different manners, like a different, for example, in a Russian Orthodox prayer, which is like, and I was like the first time I actually can have another, like, there's a slight, really, very, very slight shift, because the text is still the same. He just reads it in a different manner, so I can have a new, fresh outlook on what he does. And from Dmitry Prigov, I started to learn more about Moscow Conceptualist School, and then I read Vladimir Sorokin, Norm, which our friend in common, Max Lawton, translated, right? He translated it.
He will.
He will?
Yeah.
Okay. It's coming. It's like, it was the biggest pain point of my life. I'd been traveling to Western countries for a second, and I would rave about Norma, and it was not translated in English. It was a major problem in my life. So, and reading Sorokin, I realized what art could be. It could be something very exciting that makes me want to jump around, jump on walls, express myself in the weirdest possible manner. And I didn't know exactly how my art is going to shape, but I knew that this life force I want to keep, and I want to use it for creating art. And I will do something like those guys are doing. And also Lev Rubinstein came the next year. He's also conceptualist, artist, poet. He works a lot with found word. He works a lot with things that describe, I guess, your daily domestic activity, especially USSR. In that way, Kabakov is also, I mean, like, Kabakov is just another, how do you say it, maestro, genius of this tradition. And if you don't know them, I really wanted to check them out. They're called Moscow Romantic Conceptualists, because they're much less cerebral than Western tradition of conceptualism. It's really, truly romantic and much more poetic.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys still have copies here at the Dallas Contemporary of the Kapakov book, but they do. I'm getting some nods from some contemporary staff. I highly recommend getting this book because it was here in our city. And this whole tradition You just gave the best advertisement for the Dallas Contemporary I've ever heard too, right? Like, why do we do this? Why art? And then you do it so that some young person sits in front of this installation and they translate what they're seeing into their own conception of self and their own world that they're building, and you can go out there and truly change the world. I mean, that's why you do it. And so have to give a shout out because this oligarch's sister, whom you mentioned, is a big part of Deep Vellum's universe too, Kanyashna. And NLO, which I know is important to you as well. This woman did some amazing things culturally in Russia, and taking a literary and cultural festival to the far reaches of Siberia. It's where she grew up as well, in a different city not far from where Nadya's from. And she also started a foundation many years later, sort of with her brother's money, and helped promote good Russian art abroad, and including some books that we at Deep Vellum have published. And so,
his brother was too busy to spending it on drugs and models in Courcheville.
You know, that's okay. He had enough. He was able to spend it on many things, and so it was an interesting thing. But like you just said, in a just Russia, she's.
But I loved when he ran against Putin, honestly, because he had good points.
This guy we're talking about used to own the Brooklyn Nets. You guys may remember this. He's that Russian oligarch, and so we're not going to have to name him here. But his sister is amazing, and
I'm a big fan. I mean, she was brave enough to meet up with me right after I got out of jail. And we talked with her about doing something potentially like some cultural festivals inside of Russian jails. And it was 2014, we already had repressions. It was already like deep into the Russia becoming an autocracy type beat. But it was still, you know, even in 2014, it was still possible to think that Pussy Riot can have some sort of literature and art festival inside of Russian jail.
I mean, the 2011, there's this moment of the people's protest, and there's the moment of you and your comrades being arrested. It really does, it was the end of an era, like the door closing. In 2014, it had not officially felt like as closed off as it is today, especially with the war in Ukraine, right? And it is not a one-to-one thing in an American's mind that this amazing Russian artist would be so supportive of the war in Ukraine, right? And that you would see the intersectionality of this. But it goes back to what you mentioned before. There's a Sovietskaya shutka, anecdote on my arm, right? And that I have these Russian writers tattooed on my arm, and they're three of the greatest Russian authors of all time. It's Pushkin and Gogol and Mayakovsky. And the joke is that not one of them is actually Russian. Mayakovsky's from Georgia, Gogol's from Ukraine, and Pushkin, his great-grandfather, or excuse me, his grandfather was from Africa.
How do you call them? What would be a post-imperialist way of calling, renaming Russian avant-garde?
Yeah, I mean, you said Slavic, which is fine, but it's also not
But it's
entirely
not really,
Slavic
no, it's not
ethnically.
I don't think Georgians identify as, do they?
Eurasian. Yeah, that doesn't, we need to come up with a whole other
weird.
mode.
It sounds like Dugin's philosophy.
That's totally true. But this is the idea that this is the moment in 2022 when Westerners for the first time started to go, oh, maybe Russia and Ukraine aren't the same thing. It's something that people took for granted. Of course, people took it for granted in Ukraine and in Russia for so long too. And so the work that you've done there and this mode of reaching out to work sort of with different cultures, what is, damn, this is a terrible question, y'all. What's next for Nadya? Like, I mean, what on earth are you up to next? So there was big news in the last couple of weeks. A bunch of things have changed. How many in here follow Nadya on social media? Anyone? Yeah. If you don't, give it up and follow Nadya Riot on social media. Come on, man. She's one of the best follows out there. But two amazing pieces of news just happened. And one is that she got engaged to this amazing fellow who's hiding behind a wall over here. And so congratulations, you beautiful people. And then the other one is that your life story is something you've never really told, right? You have actually written a couple books, but they're books of activism and sort of how to get involved. And that you're working on a book now with our friend Max Lawton, who I hope is watching the live stream right now. And Max is a translator and a writer and truly someone amazing. He's the one who brought Vladimir Sorokin to us and connected us originally. And is doing amazing work. But I think you're working with Max on a book of sort of memoirs, is that what we would call it? And then this is going to be made into a TV series, which is extraordinary.
Он взял меня на слабо. Знаешь эту фразу?
Ну, конечно.
На слабо, да. Он взял меня на слабо, and he convinced me, but in a very beautiful way, to start working on this book, because I didn't want to write about my past. It's difficult to it was difficult to get out of jail, and all of a sudden people didn't want to talk with us about our art. They mostly wanted to talk about it just about our jail experience, and it was something new and weird for me, and also on a scale that I could never imagine before, and was totally not ready for that. And it's weird to complain about it because it also gave us incredible voice and opportunity, and we did good things with it. We started media zone, and it became one of the most influential media outlets in Russia today, and it's still alive, very much alive, and reports on the war in Ukraine and Russian political prisoners who, I mean, you can read it now in English. Like we translate some of the key articles in English. It's called Media Zona. Yeah, so I mean, like, I was excited about doing new stuff. I didn't want to focus on the past and discuss for the millionth time how did I spend my time in jail. But then I realized at some point that, oh, maybe it's I have good enough distance. It's been this December. It's 10 years since I got released from prison, from Russian labor camp, from Siberian labor camp, and. I've decided that I'm going to download everything I have in my brain while I'm alive, which sounds like a joke, but not really, because my ex-husband, the father of my daughter, was poisoned with a nerve agent a couple of years ago, and he recovered, luckily, but some people don't. And you really never know when that brick is going to hit your head, and you want to upload, like you want to download the whatever to put it outside of your system. And then we also work with the studio STX and amazing woman, a lesbian woman, Sophie, who is the producer of the show, and she's going to be, I guess, in charge of making a TV series based on this crazy story. It started really with me leaving my mother's vagina, and then getting into Moscow State University, then starting my first art collective with a bunch of other people called Voina, War Against Institutions and stuff, and then ended up in jail. So that whole memoir story is going to end in 2014 because I'm not ready to talk about current events. They're too close to my skin, as we say in Russia. But I think it's going to be a good educational material for people who are not familiar with Pussy Riot story. And I guess my biggest inspiration for it is to talk to a 16 years old version of myself and tell myself in a parallel reality, living somewhere in Novosibirsk or Indianapolis, that whatever you think is not possible is possible, and you just have to fight for it. I do believe in magic a little bit, so sometimes when I really truly believe in something, it seems like the universe helps me to achieve that. And it's not like exactly in the way I wanted. Like I didn't envision myself going in jail for 2 years, but oh well, I got out with a much bigger voice. So it's for someone like me, but I guess younger and in a different geographical location. I want to encourage them, and I want to let them know that it doesn't matter that nobody believes in you. Your parents probably conservative pieces of shit. They don't believe in you, but you can totally do what you said. What do you dream about?
One last sort of question, because you brought up Grupa Vojna, which is this group you're a part of, and in 2012, the group largely did one of my favorite installations in St. Petersburg with the bridges that go up at night in St. Petersburg, and I recommend everyone Google that real quick. But you mentioned the story starts with coming out of your mother's vagina, right? And so my last question for you ties that together to the Bogorodica prayer, right? To the punk prayer, and ties it together with you as an artist, because something that's really extraordinary about you is you were a young mother, right? You had your daughter at 18, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you're speaking to a 16-year-old version of yourself, something that's really amazing too is that you have also spoken about the need to talk to mothers. And your work is very intergenerational, and you inspire people of all ages. And so one last question is just, can you give us a hint of some of those inspirational things you could say to both a 16-year-old and also a 38-year-old and also like a 54-year-old how can we truly unite the generations around this need for change and to see that like we're all truly in this together, that there is a we, and that we is greater than any individual could ever do.
I'm not sure I'm a good expert in it. I have not talked to my mom for 5 years ever since I left my hometown when I was 16. So I think I'm the last person to ask about it. But when it comes to me and my daughter, we're fairly chill. We never had big fights with her. The biggest one we had was about if we're gonna go to Louvre or not. And she didn't want to go, and I was like, yeah, we have to see Mona Lisa. And she was like, no, fuck, it's going to be like a lot of tourists and crowds. And so she was right, I was wrong. And she was 7 years old when we had this fight, and now she's 15. So sometimes we reenact those fights, and it's funny. I feel like, I mean, I don't, again, I'm not an expert in motherhood. I feel like my motherhood is just so not typical. But it helps us sometimes to reenact those fights and just play them. So it kind of like a vaccine that prevents us from having them in real life. So we just sometimes just like feel like screaming at each other and being just like, fuck you, like, no, fuck you, no, fuck you, mom, like, fuck you, I hate you, it's so fucking lame. But we never do it in real life. But I think when you're up against something bigger than yourself, like against the whole Russian system of oppression that was not born yesterday, you really just incentivize to support each other and be kind to each other. And same thing goes for her friends and me, and we all treat each other as humans. And I feel like that there's something very tribal about it. I'm a big fan of Sex at Dawn, and looking back at our early matriarchal communities and looking how we used to grow all together as a tribe and just organically develop all together. And people didn't necessarily knew if this is my kid or kid's neighbor's kid, but it was all okay. And also there was no this strict division between generations. I feel like it's something about very strict nuclear family that we started to get with agricultural and then industrial society, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So I'm personally very much into tribal psychology, so we're just all hanging together. Yeah, and I don't really believe in much distinction between generations or genders. Yeah, just happens so.
Nadya, thank you so much for coming to Dallas. Thank you for your art. Thank
but
you
also I'm a weirdo, so don't.
You're also, I mean, you're an artist, and I mean that with a capital A, and you're a true artist, and you have much to continue to teach the world, and so just thank you so much. We can't wait for everything that comes next. And so for those who haven't watched it, Putin's Ashes is screening behind us. They'll turn the sound on as soon as I shut up, and I want to thank the Dallas Contemporary for hosting this amazing piece and for bringing Nadya here. For everyone who's on the board of the Contemporary, thank you to the Gallery of Santa Fe for believing in a Russian artist and putting this out there for all of us to engage with. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here on a Saturday afternoon. We appreciate y'all.